philosophical position that morality does not rest on religion or religious principles or religious doctrines, or which is certainly a position that I hold and have argued for, that morality is independent of religion. And then secondly, to talk about divine command theory as one particular version of a moral theory that is in some way dependent on religion. So let me do the second one first. Let me talk about divine command theory, and then hopefully as I do that it will become clear as to why I don't think there's any religious necessity for moral behavior, moral attitudes, moral development, or anything of that sort. But I do want this to be an ongoing conversation, so feel free to interrupt me at any time with questions. I mean, not objects hurled in my direction, but with questions or comments or concerns or anything else of that sort. So, divine command theory. Divine command theory as a theory is very simple. I mean, it is about as basic a moral theory as you can get. Divine command theory simply says that there is such a thing, there's an ontological claim at the root of it, that there is such a thing as a divine commander. And what that divine commander does is issue divine commands which have moral content and moral implications. And that's where morality comes from. That's just what morality is the commands issued by a divine commander. That's part one. Part two of divine command theory is, if you as an individual want to be a moral person, then your job is to obey the divine commands. Right? To be obedient to the commands issued by the divine commander. And that's basically it for divine command theory. That's the whole theory in a nutshell. Now we can say, I suppose, or we need to identify who the divine commander is. So, who do you suppose the divine commander is? I'll take other options here, other than Dr. Jaworski. Well, who's the logical candidate to be eligible for the role of divine commander?
I don't think there is a logical candidate.
Well, in terms of the structure of the theory, who would we think of as the divine commander?
Probably God.
God, okay? God seems to fit the job description, as popularly understood, for the divine commander who issues the divine commands. And if we want to be moral people, then our job is to obey those commands, right? That's divine command theory right there. That is it in its entirety, right? Now there are various riffs that are played on that theme, but that's basically what the theory says. You see any problems with this? Good, I didn't think so. You see any problems with this? Well, I guess not.
The fact that the divine commands are either arbitrary, whatever God chose, or that they are pre-existing, meaning that He has a full.
Okay, all right. This is going to be one big problem, the old Euthyphro problem. So we'll deal with that one in short order here. Okay. That's a big problem for divine command theory. You see any other problems with divine command theory?
Why does it have to be the God as opposed to any other God?
I'm not catching.
Well, I guess it was the way it was stated really. When you asked us who it would be, you said it would be God, as opposed to any other religious God, I guess. You made it sound like the Christian God per se, but
And how does the Buddhist God not fit
exactly?
Or how
If there was a Buddhist God,
a pantheon.
So your question is, it's going to be a problem because different people are going to identify different candidates for divine commander, right? Different gods, right? That turns out not to be a problem at all for divine command theory. And the reason is, the only thing that divine command theory actually claims is that if it's morality, it comes from God. It doesn't make any difference who your God is. It doesn't make any difference which God you pledge allegiance to. If we're talking morality, it comes from a God, period. There's no other place you can anchor morality, no other source and origin for morality other than a God, a divine being, a divine commander. So, if you want to identify Jesus as the divine commander, if you want to identify Allah as the divine commander, if you want to identify Shiva or Vishnu or whatever as the divine commander, makes no difference. Whoever you identify as a divine commander, that's where morality comes from. So it doesn't make any difference to the divine commander who, the divine command theory, who the divine commander is. The claim is, if we're talking morality, we're talking some divine commander.
You can't just say it's some type of social construct.
No.
That over time.
Well, it's not divine command theory. Divine command theory says it comes from a divine commander. So if you want to say it's a social construct, well, you're into some other theory then.
Okay.
You're not dealing with divine command theory. Okay?
No, that's what I was going to ask. So you're basically asserting, to word it differently, you're asserting that morality does not come from mankind in any way intrinsically.
Yeah, it comes from a divine commander. If we're talking morality, we're talking about something that comes from a divine commander. Doesn't make any difference who that divine commander is. We're talking about morality, and where it comes from a divine commander, period. We're done now. Except for the fact that if you want to be moral yourself, you want to be a moral person, well, then that consists in obeying the divine commander.
Right. Understood.
So I guess we're done with that piece.
No disagreements here.
No disagreement. So you all buy this divine command theory?
So the cameraman here has a disagreement, and I guess that.
Oh, what?
No.
So if God says to rape and murder 8-year-old girls, and I'm a divine command theorist, does that make that okay? Because God says so.
If that's a command from God, yeah, your job is to obey.
Isn't that a flaw in divine command theory?
Well, why would that be a flaw?
Because raping and murdering 8-year-old girls is wrong?
Oh, wait a minute. What determines what's right and wrong just is the commands of the divine commander. So if the divine commander says, go rape and murder that 8-year-old girl, then that is by definition not wrong. It is by definition moral. You're importing some other criteria for establishing what's right and wrong other than the commands of a divine commander, and that ain't allowed.
So all I need to say is that my God's technically a being that has a set of physical laws, and those laws may just be some type of binary code, and therefore those binary codes are just sent out to people, and we have to follow those.
Say that. I mean, that I suppose that would be one version. I've never heard it quite put that way, but that might be one version of divine command theory.
So it's really not a question of whether the code, since it fits any different God, it's hard to say really, I guess. There's no standard morality then, because if it's different for each God, then aren't morality
standard,
different?
in other words, you want a constant.
Yes.
Okay. The only constant in divine command theory is that if it's morality, it comes from a divine commander. That's just where morality comes from. In a sense, it's really a theory about the sources of morality. And the source of morality is always a divine commander. That's the constant. Okay? Sounds good, huh?
Sounds like a failed moral theory.
Where's the failure?
There's no failure if you interpret it correctly.
But
Yeah, get with the program here, okay? Interpret it
It's
correctly.
failed in regards to James's morality. It's failed.
Well-
in regards to my morality, it's also failed. But I mean,
I know,
Well,
but
that's your problem.
example.
Well,
But
That sounds like a personal problem. Exactly.
But if divine command theory is it just doesn't work in real life, then what's the point of having that as a moral theory if it just doesn't have any real practical purpose?
Why wouldn't it work in real life?
I think your problem is you're just accepting the term divine, and you're putting everything under a religious connotation, and you don't have to.
It seems like the assumption being made here is that raping 8-year-old girls is bad.
Right.
And I don't think we can make that assumption under the divine
Because
command
under
theory.
certain religions, that may be moral.
It's not even
Well,
considered rape.
what would make it moral is if it's a command
Yes.
from a divine commander. What's
But it's
its
not
source?
necessarily bad unless, like God says.
But, from our religious perspective, it's not moral.
I think from any civilized human being, I don't think they would see.
That's a bold claim to make.
I think
Maybe their God isn't civilized.
I see, I don't have to do anything. They're going to attack you on their own. This is good. I like it. So, if there's going to be problems with divine command theory, they will arise in one of two ways. Either there will be some kind of internal incoherence in the theory, or there will be something that, I'm never happy with this kind of language, but we can flesh it out and make it more solid. It violates some of our intuitions about morality, some of our basic reactions to what we think is moral. And James was giving an example of that by pulling out 8-year-old girls being raped and murdered. There's something intuitive in him that says, well, that's just wrong. But when we start to get down to some kind of epistemic level and try to find reasons why it's wrong, of course, divine command theory is going to trump every one of those reasons by simply saying, well, it was a command of God, therefore it's good. Right? Nonetheless, there's a sense in which it wreaks havoc with our intuitions about what morality ought to look like in cases like that. Right? And there are ways in which we can see how our intuitions might have some fiber to them, rather than just being sort of like, oh, I don't like that. So then that's going to be a problem for divine command theory. But there's also the internal incoherence problem with divine command theory. So basically, traditionally, there are three issues, three problems, three conundrums that have been raised about divine command theory that have proven to be enduring and that really, when combined, create a lot of doubt about the salience of divine command theory. One has to do with the usefulness of divine command theory in actually guiding moral behavior. So, for instance, give me an example of a divine command that would be useful as a moral theory or as a moral command.
thou shalt not kill.
Thou shalt not kill. Okay? I believe that's in the Bible. Right? I believe it comes from God. Right? So it's a prime candidate for being an expression of divine command theory. Right? So what does that mean? Thou shalt not kill. Good. You're right on top of this stuff. Well, what does that mean?
They get a tough room here.
They never learn, do they?
How about-
We ask the questions, they give the answers.
You're part of the audience too,
You want me to
Jaworski.
play? Well,
Sure.
it means you shouldn't kill
Do not take it out of there.
people.
Animals?
Does the commandment specify, just as a side question, does it just say thou shalt not kill?
Yes.
Because that's a strong defense for being vegan. If you were to,
That's why I put the word little people with the
Yeah,
reflected question mark at the
I'd
end.
never
I'm
thought
just
of
trying to move things along.
Yeah, what are we talking about here?
no, certainly your question is, could you?
What do you mean when you answer my question? What does that mean? Shall not kill.
I mean, thou shalt not kill, do not kill.
Okay, and how should we apply that?
How we've chosen to apply it.
No,
thus
how
far.
should we apply that? Let's keep it moral here.
Oh, well,
How should we apply that?
don't kill.
Yeah, that's good.
I feel like I'm
That
thinking about
advances the
it.
conversation.
To the end of another living being's life.
What?
Do not contribute to the ending of another being's life,
Okay,
indirectly or directly.
so, if, as I have been warned to do, I brought my Magnum 357 with me to this meeting, and I pull it out and I start peppering people with bullets, the commandment, God's commandment, thou shalt not kill, would be applicable in that case. Is that right? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Yes.
You're not hearing much of anything.
You people are atheists about everything, aren't you? There's no belief in anything anymore.
Seems like an agnostic rumor that no one wants to say anything.
I think they sense a trap or something.
Oh, from me? From me? No. Well, I don't know. Are we talking mosquitoes here? No, why not?
It seems like the way we've chosen to apply that
No,
command.
no, 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 not the way we chose it. What does God intend in saying, thou shalt not kill?
Am I supposed to know his
It's
intentions?
It's his commandment. You should know.
Yeah,
You
well,
He
okay.
tells us and we're supposed to obey it.
Right. Here's the problem. The commandment from the divine commander, and this is going to be true for divine commands in general, is very vague, very unspecified as to exactly how we apply it, right? So if someone says to you, to take another example here, if someone says to you, thou shalt not bear false witness, isn't that a divine command? I think it's in there someplace, right? Thou shalt not bear false witness. And you go, what does that mean? Well, what does it mean? Don't bear false witness. What does that mean? Don't lie, right? All right, don't lie. So, your elderly aunt, whom you love dearly, and who happens to be worth an awful lot of money, and she's very fond of you, and she's very old. You see the picture here? Yeah. Worth a lot of money, very fond of you, very old, comes to your door one day, and on top of her head is the ugliest, most hideous, most grotesque looking hat you've ever seen in your life. And she says to you, "Dearie, I just found this wonderful new hat down at Walmart. Don't you just love it?" What do you say? You don't answer the door, I see. You don't. What do you say?
Well, you most likely say yes. Like you do like it.
What are you doing?
I've never been
lying.
You're lying. Oh, bearing false witness. You're dead meat. Is this what the commandment means? Is this what the commandment is about?
Like, you mean like you don't, like you can't hold a false witness.
You can't bear the false witness.
Throw a bear.
Oh, I can't tolerate it. Is that what you mean? Yeah, I see. I can't tolerate false. Okay, well, good. Then what would you say to your elderly aunt if you can't tolerate false witness? That stinks. You look horrible in that thing. Get out of here. Is that what you say?
Are we assuming there's no human tact that can be applied, where I can say like, "Oh, Grandma, you're such a character," and hug her? And
Are you answering her question?
do I have to? Is that where in the Bible does it say I have to answer my grandma's questions?
Well, if you refuse to answer a direct question,
Is that?
does that come under the heading of false witness?
I don't believe so.
You don't believe so. How do you know?
Because they can always ask you again.
If they're persistent, but that's their own agenda.
I mean, you can say she's very old.
Thought
and not-
experiment, so you can't get away with that.
Yeah, listen, this is my story, okay? I'm telling the story.
That's why I don't want to bring that up further because it's such a moot point. She's gonna keep asking. Seriously though, that come on.
How about this case? What's your name? Martin. Martin. Okay. Martin, are you friends with James? Thank you. Thank you. Your wisdom knows no bounds, okay? But let's assume for a minute that you guys are pretty good friends, okay? But you have a fight, right? You and Jake, you imagine anything like that, fighting with him. You guys have a fight, and James is really, really angry with you, right? And you know that James is looking for you, and that if James finds you, it ain't gonna be pleasant, right? So you come to me for help, and I hide you in my house, right? I've got you stashed away, in the bowels of some closet somewhere, under a bunch of, pile of dirty underwear or something, and you're hiding. And James comes to the door, and I answer the door, and there is James standing on my doorstep. He has got an AK-47 in one hand. He's got a rocket launcher in the other hand. He's got a bandolier of hand grenades across his chest. He's got knives sticking out of his all too luxuriant hair. And he says to me, do you know where Martin? Right. Do you know where Martin is? I'm gonna kill that SOB. I know where Martin is. What do you want me to do?
Well, I could have moved, so you could technically say no.
Yeah, you don't know for certain if he's still alive.
Very good. Very good.
I'm almost positive he's in this.
You could also be vague.
Well, the point being, if I know where you are, what should I tell him?
You say yes, but you wouldn't tell him he's in the closet and you say yes.
Oh, well, what if he says to me, okay, where is he?
Exactly where I left him.
In other words, you're not answering the question, are you? This is back to the elderly aunt, right? The point being here that the commands that we get from the divine commander, as they have come down to us, are uniformly general. They're very generic. They're vague. We're never quite sure how to apply them in real situations. In order to apply them to real situations, we routinely have to import other moral considerations independent of divine command theory. And so you say to yourself, well, it's my elderly aunt and I can't stand that hat, but why offend her? Why make her unhappy? She's, 114 years old and this is not worth doing. So I'll tell her I like it. Right? Well, aren't we bringing in considerations of compassion and kindness and things like that are no place to be found in the divine command itself? Aren't we importing other moral considerations? Yeah. So the divine commands themselves do not provide you with enough information to know how those are to be applied in real life situations. They're too general. They're too vague.
What
Right?
happens if you're just following the wrong set of commands?
Give me an example of a wrong set of commands.
If you've chosen, the wrong set of divine
Well, how do you know when you have the wrong set of commands?
How do you know when you have the right ones?
Well, if it came from the divine commander, then it's the right set of commands.
Well, if the problem is that they're too vague, then there's clearly then a problem with the commander, and therefore that commander doesn't fit you. So why don't you go try to find another divine?
Unfortunately, this seems to be a generic quality of divine commands, is that they are very broad, very general, and non-specific with regard to how they get applied. I mean, we are not given in the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments in the Old Testament, a user's manual for how to apply these commands. So they really, they're sort of like ideals, but they don't tell us how the ideals are to be actually applied in a particular concrete situation. And so we're always left wondering, is lying to my elderly aunt really a violation of the 8th commandment? Or when I slap a mosquito, is that really a violation of the 5th commandment? We're left uncertain. about how to apply these things. So divine commands, generally speaking, are so vague, so generic, that they're not very useful in actually charting, guiding how we are to live our lives. Right? That's one problem with divine command theory. The second, of course, is the classic one that was mentioned earlier about the Euthyphro problem. Now, you've all read the Euthyphro? You know what the Euthyphro problem is? A couple of nods and about 18 blank stares. Well, the Euthyphro is I'll tell you, if you have not ever read any of the dialogues of Plato, the Euthyphro would be a kind of an ideal place to start, along with the Apology, maybe the Crito, which is even shorter than the Euthyphro. But the Euthyphro is really good for a number of reasons. One is it's fairly short. It's about a dozen pages long. So it's not something that you're going to have to spend the entire weekend dedicated to. For another thing, of all the dialogue, or when you survey the scope of Plato's dialogues, it's one of the more engagingly written ones. And right in the middle of the Euthyphro, it's about a 3-page section that captures an argument that has been central in Western thought ever since Plato put it down. Right? This discussion between Euthyphro and Socrates. And it's about divine command theory. It's a classic passage right in the middle of the Euthyphro. The Euthyphro is worth reading just for those 3 pages, just so you get a sense for the problem that has become known since that time as the Euthyphro dilemma. And the dilemma goes like this. I'm not going to give you the whole story of the Euthyphro because we're running out of time here, but Euthyphro, who's a friend of Socrates, and Socrates are discussing the relationship between good, what is considered good, and the gods. It's a sort of rendition of what James was talking about before. We talked about the 8-year-old girl getting raped and murdered. And of course the objection being, well, if it came from God, then it's good, right? Just what is the relationship between the gods and what is considered good? And how should we define that? And in the discussion, in this really poignant discussion between Euthyphro and Socrates, Socrates says, there are 2 ways to go with this, to find an answer to this question, the relationship between what is good and what the gods are doing with what is good. What's the relationship between the two? He said there are 2 ways to go. One is to say that things are good, actions, events, states of affairs are good because God says so. That nothing is good in itself, but things become good when God decrees them to be good. And the same is true for bad things. There's nothing that's bad or wrong to do in itself. Things are only good or bad because God says they are. And in God saying that they then become good or bad as a result of God decreeing them to be so. Right? Right. So, nothing is good or bad in and of itself. Things only are good and bad because God has declared them that way. Right? That's one possibility. The other possibility is that things just are innately, inherently good or bad, and God recognizes this. God, in his sort of synoptic view of all of reality, is able to wander around and go, oh, that stinks. That's just bad. And then he recommends these things to the rest of us. So he says, you see that thing over there? Come here, humanity. See that thing over there? That is really bad. Don't do that. Right? So it's not like something is bad or good because God has decreed it that way. It's that there are things that are just bad to do, and there are things that are just good to do. And God recognizes those facts and then tells us what to do and not do on that basis. Okay? So the difference is, on the one hand, things are good or bad because God says so, and on the other hand, things are good or bad because that's just their nature, and God recognizes that and then clues us in that hey, listen, don't do that stuff. Or do that stuff because it's good. Right? See the difference between these two? Now, Socrates says to Euthyphro, let's look at the first one. If things are good because God says they're good, then things are good just in an arbitrary way, right? I mean, after all, God could have said anything. I mean, it's God, after all, right? He could have said anything. He could have said raping and murdering 8-year-old girls is good. Couldn't he? I mean, he's God. He's going to tell him no. Right? So God could have said that. And then that would have been good. But that seems pretty arbitrary, doesn't it? I mean, anything. Well, what's more, he's God, so he can change his mind, right? And in fact, there are examples in the Bible of God changing his mind. So we know that even for those who accept the Bible, those folks have to acknowledge that God can change his mind, because he does it in the Bible. So God could say today, you know something, it's a bad thing that you rape and kill little 8-year-old girls. I don't like that, and so I don't want you doing that. I'm declaring that to be bad. And then tomorrow he says, yeah, 8-year-old girls, all right, let's do it. Rape and kill, okay. Yeah, that's good. I decided that was good today. Yeah, could God do that? Well, again, he's God. Who's going to tell him no? Right? But is this any way to run a moral theory? Where what's right and wrong and good and bad and appropriate and inappropriate is arbitrary and subject to momentary change? No, thank you. I got one to answer me here. This appears to be a very eccentric, idiosyncratic, frivolous almost way to run a moral theory, where the divine commander could command anything he wants, and he could change his mind at a moment's notice. All right? How are we supposed to live if that's the case? So Euthyphro says to Socrates, no, that can't be right then. That it can't work that way. So it must be the case that things are good and bad, right and wrong, appropriate and inappropriate, in and of themselves. Right? And God recognizes this and then recommends them to the rest of us. But then Socrates says, that means that good and bad are independent of God. They exist apart from anything God says or does. And God just simply, after the fact, comes along and acknowledges, oh yeah, that's good. No, oh yeah, that's bad. And the best he can do is clue us in as to what already is the case, that he had nothing to do with. Right? And Socrates says to Euthyphro, is this a happy picture of God? No, because first of all, it wreaks havoc with divine command theory, because now we don't even have a divine commander anymore. We just have a divine recommender. Right? He's not commanding anything. He's just recognizing certain things that already exist. Right? So it wreaks havoc with divine command theory. But then secondly, this picture of God kind of makes him irrelevant to morality. Because if God could figure this stuff out, why couldn't we figure it out? I mean, who needs God? I mean, again, you ever driven in a car with like 3 or 4 of your friends, and you got at least one friend in the car who's always telling you, turn here, or go there, no, don't go that way, right? You like that stuff? No, you know how to get where you're going, right? You know, who needs that? Well, if God can see what's right and wrong and good and bad, why can't we? Who needs God to be recommending things to us?
It's as if a king or the kingdom, the higher up people, are recognizing this stuff and then just saying that God recognized it to get lesser intelligent.
Right, that might be one way in which that dynamic plays out in some kind of show reality. It's like, we're all too stupid to figure out what's right and wrong. We need somebody who will tell us what they're seeing. Right? Who will give us directions that are not of their own making, right? But we're just too dumb to figure this out. Right? Euthyphro says to Socrates, that doesn't work either. Socrates says, well, you know something? If neither one of these things works, then what is the relationship between God and the good? And Euthyphro and Socrates talk about this a little bit more, and they raise some more issues. But at the end, Euthyphro acknowledges that he has no idea how to parse the question about the relationship between God and the good, what becomes for them in the dialogue the problem of piety, what it means to be a pious person, a God-respecting person. Euthyphro admits, I don't understand this anymore at all. I got no clue. Well, if your moral theory, which is based on a divine commander, can't figure out what the relationship between the divine commander and the good is, how good is your moral theory? I mean, isn't the moral theory supposed to be about the relationship of the divine commander and what's good and what's bad? Are these real students?
They're not in the mood for
Answering questions.
Pardon?
I think we agree with you too much.
Oh,
Yeah, that's all it is.
well, I gotta
Answering
change.
your questions is rhetorical, I think.
I gotta
So you
change-
know what
change
the
my
answer's
thinking.
supposed to be.
Well, anyway, the point being, there's an internal incoherence in divine command theory because it can't address the central question of the relationship between God and the good in any kind of consistent way.
Well, aren't you kind of then just looking at like the Christian Bible and saying, oh, he changes his mind? Divine theory could still work with other religions.
Well, it turns out that I'm not aware at any rate of other religions, even the one that would come the closest to a God who never changes his mind, which would be Islam, has some passages in the Quran where God looks like he has simply arbitrarily decreed some things to be and not to be. And so you still have the problem with arbitrariness. God says women are to be veiled. Oh, well, is that a moral concern? Well, it is for Allah. Well, how come? That's just the way he wants it.
Well, maybe we're just too stupid to actually understand why he decrees it that.
Okay. And what is it that would lead you to the conclusion that we're too stupid to recognize the reason for this?
Well, because he's divine.
Oh, okay, but that makes us too stupid to realize the reason?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wouldn't that also make us too stupid to understand how to apply that rule?
Well, it sounds like divine command is you're either supposed to accept it or not accept it, and that's what makes you a moral person. So you should just accept it in all its entirety.
Yeah, but the demonstrates is that there is an internal incoherence at the very heart of divine command theory, because it can't figure out exactly what the relationship between the divine commander and what's right and wrong is. And if you can't do that, I mean, how far is your theory going to carry you? Your moral theory going to carry you? Well, not very far, because there's this kind of internal coherence. The third big problem with divine command theory has to do with the second part of divine command theory, and that is that if you want to be a good person under divine command theory, what do you have to do? Obey. You have to obey the divine commands, right? But is obedience the same thing as being moral? Is obeying a command the same thing as being moral?
Not by our definition of morality.
No. And again, this implicates some of our intuitions here about this stuff. But if that were true, that simply obeying a command were the same thing as being moral, then you guys are all so young, you don't remember this, even Dr. Jaworski's too young. to remember this. Yeah, World War II, you ever heard of this? Does this ring a bell with anybody, World War II? Yeah. Well, as a matter of fact, I am, but then thank you for saying so. But at the end of World War II, the victorious Allies put on trial the Nazi officers, military officers, right? The Nuremberg trials, right?
Oh, man.
Oh, yeah, okay, it's coming back to you now. Okay, you were there, right?
Yeah.
There were a whole raft of these generals and admirals and so forth in the German military who were put on trial for war crimes, right? And what was the defense of these German Nazi military officials?
We were just following orders.
We were just following orders. Now, if divine command theory were true, those guys would have the perfect defense. Because what divine command theory tells us to do if we want to be moral is to just follow orders.
Isn't that telling us to just follow God's order, not just follow His order?
Yeah, but we talked about earlier the fact that we have a problem with following God's orders in that they are so vague, so general, so generic, and that they're arbitrary and that they can change. And so, because He's God, I mean, He can do that stuff. So, in that case, following God's orders, saying, well, we're not just following any orders, we're following God's orders, lands us back in the first problem, which is, yeah, what you're following now are arbitrary laws that can change at a moment's notice. So, and again, our intuition about what counts as a redeemable moral theory kind of gets violated there, because we think that morality has got to have some stability about it, right? It can't be like, I can plagiarize a paper for Dr. Jaworski's class, but not for Dr. Pearson's class, right? Doesn't that seem kind of arbitrary? And doesn't that seem like it's not going to be a very stable basis for developing a morality? Yeah, so we land back in that problem again. But just on the basis of the claim, which is what's made in divine command theory, that to be a moral person yourself, what you need to do is obey the commands. Obedience means being moral. We see in lots of other applications of being obedient that doesn't seem to result in anything we would want to call moral, right? That just being obedient. Don't we think that being moral would include, this is not exhaustive, it's maybe necessary but not sufficient, includes that we take some ownership for our decisions and our actions, that we own up to what we have done. We're not just saying, well, I obeyed what was told me to do. That we claim what we do. We're responsible for what we do. Right? Don't we think that? Isn't that kind of intuition we have about morality? All together now. Yes, teacher.
Yes, teacher.
Okay.
But,
But?
nobody's gone. Sorry, I'm just imagining all the theists I know would say that.
Oh, well, we're
But we still had to be the one who chose to obey the order, and there is us taking on the responsibility. And if we chose to not obey the order, then we would have been, disowning God or whatever.
well, the theist in saying that is going to be standing on grounds that can be undercut as well. Like, so how well did your choice work? I'm saying the theist. How well did your choice, were you able to actually accomplish what you chose?
I didn't have a scenario in mind.
Oh, well, see,
What were
the
they doing?
theist is also committed to some doctrine of sin, which is going to preclude them from being able to actively and effectively choose these things, right? So I've dealt with theists. They can undercut that position.
Aren't you a theist?
I am a theist. Well, I am a theist up to a point. I'm a Christian.
Theist?
I am a Christian. I'm a pretty devout and pretty I have concerns about what passes for theism in American popular culture. So if you're thinking of theist in the sense that you see these guys on TV, no, I'm not a theist. Okay? James, we've had many talks about this. I'm a Lutheran. And it is questionable to what extent Lutheran theology is congruent with traditional theism. We're Christians. Oh, we're pretty emphatically Christians. And I am pretty emphatically Christian. But theism as a sort of philosophical construct doesn't exactly fit well with Lutheran theology. I won't say any more about that.
Can I ask you a slightly personal question regarding your...
Yes, I am married.
Yes, you are married. Well,
Or not that person.
now that I'm accepting your argument that morality is not derived from a higher power, that
Okay.
the divine command theory is flawed,
Okay.
what do you believe is God's place in our life? What do you believe?
What do I believe is God's what?
God's place, His job? What does He do fundamentally? If we have our own morality and we're capable of identifying and following our own morality, is He just the arbiter, or what do you feel He does?
Well, I'm going to give you the Lutheran answer. Okay? All right, you ready for this?
A really profound shrug.
If you ever want to take a class with me and you can pass it, yeah, then you're going to respond differently than that.
On the other hand, you just got an A from me.
Oh, the non-Lutheran here.
God's messing with you. He's messing with you.
Yeah, don't mess with Luther. I mean, that's a Lutheran position. God's involvement on the one level is transcendent. I mean, Christian Lutherans believe that God's primary activity is redemptive and not moral. That God's activity has to do with redeeming, saving. This is what Jesus was all about, was redeeming us in spite of our moral failures. In fact, even accepting our moral failures, this is why Jesus died and was raised again. So God is not in the business of telling us how we ought to live, but in redeeming us so that we can live more appropriately, but not giving us the formulas for that. So God's activity is redemptive, not to manage our moral lives.
Don't the Ten Commandments directly contradict that? If God is not in the business of telling us how to live, then why would He give us the
Okay, now
commandments?
this is where some of the peculiarities of Lutheranism start to creep in. Okay, so this is not philosophical. This is just eccentric. Okay, Lutherans have a very, very powerful doctrine of sin. I mean, we think sin is the basic datum for figuring stuff out about our relationship with God. And as a result, Lutherans say that God wants to show us all the time how feeble our own efforts are to save ourselves, right? We're just not capable of saving ourselves. One of the ways in which he does that is he says, okay, go ahead and try to save yourself. I'll give you some rules. We'll see if you can live up to them. So he gives us the Ten Commandments knowing we can't do them. And in knowing we can't do them, we are driven to a kind of despair. We kick the car.
So he accepts Him as a divine redeemer.
And so then we say, I have to throw myself on the grace of God and what Jesus did for me. Because, yeah, you gave me a bunch of rules. I can't do them. I can't live up to them. So now what do I do? Well, then God says, I'll take care of this.